Critter Crusades, the show about ordinary people on extraordinary missions to help animals. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you here. We have an extraordinary guest tonight. Her name is Rory Freedman. She's a well-known bestseller author, but she's an animal activist. Welcome, Rory.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yes. So wonderful to hear that you can do a lot of different things besides just be an animal rescuer. A lot of times we have people here on the show that rescue animals, but it's interesting. You're doing something different. Explain to the audience exactly what is an animal activist. And the reason I ask that is a lot of people think of animal activists as somebody that goes out and does something harmful to the community, harmful to buildings, to get a point across, people that protest. There's different ways to be an animal activist. What type of animal activist are you?
I like to think of myself as the best kind of animal activist, and I think that there's, just like any other group of people, there can be people who are extremists and there are people who are militants, and then there are the vast majority, which are people who are just trying to make a difference. And as an animal rights activist, what I do is try and educate people about how they can make their lives something more in line to compassion for animals, and not really, sometimes we go about our everyday lives, we don't really think how we're affecting the lives of animals, and I take it on myself to try and help people and see the ways that they can do better for animals.
So how did you start out with being in love with animals, or start with your activism?
Well, like everybody else, I grew up loving animals. I had a dog as a kid, I had cats and a bird growing up. And then one day when I was in college, I realized that I had always been calling myself an animal lover, and I thought I was going to be a veterinarian when I grew up, but I wasn't extending that same compassion to other animals like cows and chickens and pigs. And it never occurred to me to think about how the animals that I considered myself to love, cows, chickens, and pigs, went from living, feeling things to meat. And when I was confronted with that and I realized what happens to these animals and how they're made into meat, I started to feel like a hypocrite, and I didn't feel like an animal lover anymore, and I decided at that point I was going to become a vegetarian.
How did your family or your friends feel about that?
They were surprised because I'm from New Jersey, and our typical diet where I'm from and where I grew up and with my family was meat and cheese and chicken and fish, and I never ate fruit, I never ate vegetables, I would never even look twice in the direction of tofu. But they were supportive, and my family is also, you know, an animal-loving family. So when I explained to them why I was doing what I was doing and what I had learned about factory farming and about animals, they decided to come along for the ride, and now my parents are also vegetarians, and my sister's a mostly vegetarian. She sometimes strays a little bit. But
so you converted some.
I did.
I did. Oh, that's great. I'm from Texas, so I know it grew up in a territory where it's, you know, a big part of the product of the state is beef, and people call it beef. They don't talk about animals. It's called this other thing. So when you did this, you began doing other sorts of activities to help animals. What sort of things did you do?
That's right. Basically, the reason I went vegetarian, I got a magazine in the mail from an animal rights group, and it talked about vegetarianism and what happens in factory farming, and that's when I became an activist.
Explain factory farming.
Factory farming. I always assumed that animals grew on factory farm, that they lived in these beautiful green rolling meadows and they had pastures to roam in and that they lived these beautiful happy lives. And what I learned about factory farming is that out of the 10 billion animals that are slaughtered every year in this country for food, 99.99% of them grow on factory farms. And what that means is they're not on those rolling green meadows or pastures. What they're living in either stalls that are so small they can't turn around or lie down, or they're living in cages. For example, egg-laying hens are living in cages so small that they literally can't open their wings, and that they're each sort of relegated to a space that's less than the size of a sheet of paper. And cows have their horns often ripped out of their heads. They're branded. Teeth on pigs, teeth are cut off or shaved off because the pigs that are not kept in cages or confined to small spaces are often violent with each other, and they either bite each other or the factory workers. Chickens have their beaks chopped off their faces with a scalding blade. And this is all because when they're overcrowded in the way that they are, they become violent and territorial and aggressive. So in order to have the factory workers not get injured by them, or for the animals, other animals, to not injure each other, they do a lot of these kinds of things. So that's factory farming.
I know that there's a lot of groups and people trying to pass legislation to make it a more compassionate industry. Has there been any progress that you've seen?
There's been a lot of progress, and I know that as an activist, I try and be involved as much as I can, whether it's writing letters to our senators or to our congressmen or to even companies who are doing something that you're either for or against, or letters to the editors of the newspaper. But it's made a difference. Everybody's involvement's made a difference, and more companies and more legislators are now getting involved with animal rights because they realize it's an important issue to voters. And we've made a lot of strides. We still have a long way to go, but it's definitely hopeful, and I definitely feel optimistic in the direction that we're going in. And I've got a lot of favorite animal rights groups that I either volunteer with or that I speak when they have events. They invite me to come and speak. And Humane Society of the United States is a great group. Also PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, Animal Acres, which is out here in Los Angeles, and in fact, Farm Sanctuary, all great groups.
I know that Oprah took on the cattlemen in Texas, I believe it was, and you know, they're huge lobby groups, and you're talking about a gross national product that it would very much affect the country if things happened in that way. But then you have these other issues. You've got mad cow you've got to be considering. I know that's a whole thing that people are saying, oh, mad cow doesn't exist. I know there's a writer, I believe it's Howard Lyman, wrote a book about the mad cow disease, and I know you were speaking with me earlier about that. You know, it affects you as well, not just if you're solely not a meat eater any longer. It can affect you due to dairy. That's right. I actually just read an article, and I wish I could remember where I read it, but there was a new study that talked about the prions found in milk, and that they're now saying, where before they didn't think that this was the case, but they're now saying that mad cow disease can be transmitted through dairy products. And mad cow disease isn't the only thing we need to worry about for our health as far as eating meat goes. The China study has been out for about a year now. It's one of the most comprehensive studies on diet and nutrition that's ever been published, and the doctor who wrote it has more than 4 decades of high-level research. And in his book, he links the consumption of animal products, whether it's through meat or dairy, to the high level of diseases of affluence. So countries like ours, who have high levels of intake for dairy products and meat products, they're the ones who have the highest levels of cancer and heart disease, obesity, diabetes. And you look at the other countries, the Asian countries, different places that are more poverty-stricken, they don't have those incidents of cancers like we do. And it seems to be that's a whole other industry that we could we could go off on, because there is a connection. There has to be. There is a connection. So this information that you learned and you gained throughout your early life has affected you. So then it made you go to the next level, which was becoming an author. Now you have a book called Skinny Bitch. Now some people would say, no, that's sort of a derogatory word or whatever. What's the meaning behind the book, and tell me something about the book?
I'd be happy to. Basically, we titled the book Skinny Bitch for one reason and one reason only: to get people to read it. Unfortunately, our country is obsessed with image and obsessed with being thin and looking good, but nobody really seems to care much about their health these days. We talk a lot about it, but there's really not a lot going on there. So my co-author and I, Kim Barnwin, titled the book Skinny Bitch just to get people to stop and say, what is this book, Skinny Bitch, and to get people to read it. And I'm really glad that we did that, because the book is getting a lot of attention, and once it gets in people's hands, and they may think, oh, what's this fluffy nonsense book, or maybe these girls are idiots and they don't know what they're talking about, but it's well researched. We didn't pull the information out of the sky. It's really just informative, and we've got more than 200 endnotes in the book. We cite from more than 100 sources, and we just really want to educate people. The things that we learned before writing the book that prompted us to write the book, and also the things that we learned while we were researching the book, really blew our minds. And
so you're a serious vegan.
I'm a fun vegan, but I mean business. I'm here to make changes.
Right. The main point I mean is that some people think of the screaming liberal, crazy animal rights, vegetarian vegans. And then there's people that are looking at this, and I know the way you said it had been promoted was not even to talk about veganism. It was really to talk about health.
Right.
Because really what they're finding more and more in these studies are the connection between a more plant and fruit-based diet is a healthier diet.
Right.
And there's no magic to that. I mean, it's how man is really meant to live, and the way that we are now eating, everybody knows that looking at the children with diabetes, the children with obesity, it's just a fact. And I saw somebody the other day, I was walking, and I saw some Asian children so obese. And the Asian society tends to be a very thin healthy society. And I was thinking, that child was brought up here in the United States. And you look at that and you can see something's happening with our youth. It's on the radio, it's everywhere. So when you did the research with your partner, you did this with a little bit of lightness, sort of a Sex and the City with the diet world, and fun and light. And so you became a best-selling author overnight, it seems like, with the LA Times, and that's a wonderful thing. So you raised consciousness. What was the reaction of people when they learned that there was a vegan aspect to it?
There's definitely a mix. I mean, some people are sort of horrified that, they're sitting down and they're reading this, what they think is a fluffy diet book, and then they're stumbling across this information about slaughterhouses and what goes on in these slaughterhouses. Or, for example, we talk about the transportation, getting from a farm, a factory farm where an animal's raised, and then getting them to the slaughterhouse. And the animals are exposed to the elements for sometimes 8 hours at a time. And in the winter time, they're not protected from the cold or from the snow or from the freezing weather. And an animal will literally get frozen to the side of a truck. And when they arrive, the animals are alive but frozen to the side of the truck, and they'll just be pulled out of the truck, and sometimes a limb will literally be pulled off the animal. And a lot of people are not prepared to read that, and I don't blame them. I wasn't prepared to learn that either. And I think because it's too hard to imagine making any changes in your own life, it's easier to be angry at the person who's presenting the information to you. That's on one scale. On the other scale, we're getting letters every single day, emails and letters from people who are thanking us that they've gone vegan as a result of reading the book, that it's changed their lives. I just got a letter from a woman who, for the first time in her life, she's under 300 pounds, so that was really exciting to hear. And also, a recent letter I got was from a woman whose 70-year-old mother read the book. Believe it or not, a 70-year-old woman read a book called Skinny Bitch, and now she's vegan, and so is her 80-year-old diabetic boyfriend. So they're spreading veganism to their senior citizen community, and that's pretty exciting.
That's great. Now, I saw a quote, I believe it was John Robbins, who wrote Diet for a New America. He said, "Skinny Bitch is outrageous, wickedly irreverent, and right on the mark. Any young woman who pays attention to this book will become healthier, thinner, and more powerful." Well, that can make you think, it really has nothing to do other than let's stay in that skinny group of Hollywood youth. But really, you go then to the next review and you have something from the person from the woman that began PETA, or,
right,
talking about it, take no prisoner's attitude with cogent analysis and scientific proof to make an engagingly, wickedly irreverent, and ironclad case for eating healthfully. And it's also talking about taking them into the next level, which is veganism, it's that territory. Now, I'll admit, and I was speaking to you before, I've been a vegetarian for 22 years. Becoming vegan is that thing, that territory, that next level that you go to. You do have to have a commitment, though, in the fact that you do have to be prepared food-wise to eat. There's restaurants that aren't compatible with a vegan diet. I mean, yes, you can always eat a salad, you can always do this. How does someone go about having a healthy eating plan? What would be a normal day for you eating?
Okay, there's so many things that we were going to cover right now. And the first thing I want to say, for people who are overwhelmed, I get it. I know it's overwhelming. All I ate was meat and cheese every day of my life. I get it. And I think the best thing that we can recommend is to not worry about becoming this perfect overnight animal rights activist, vegan, perfect eater. It's okay to do things in increments, and one of the things that we outline in the book is sort of a way to take it one step at a time. And I didn't become a vegan overnight. It took me 10 years to get off cheese, because cheese is addictive. When people say, "I'm so addicted to cheese," it's true. You're physiologically addicted to cheese. And
what makes it addictive?
Well, in all milk, whether it's coming from a human or a cow or a giraffe or any other mammal, there's casein. And when casein breaks down, it releases this sort of opiates into the bloodstream or into the body of whoever's ingesting it. And the reason is, when we breastfeed our young, we want to make sure that our young actually want to eat. So our breast milk has this casein and this opiate, so when a baby's crying, it's not really hungry, it just needs a fix of these opiates again.
Right.
So casein in milk is found in a specific concentration, but then when you have cheese, the casein is in even a higher concentration. So it's really hard to give up the cheese because you are addicted to this cheese. But I tell you what, once you give it up, you feel different. It does affect you in a way that you don't really expect, and it sort of changes your whole mentality towards food. It sort of gives you this purity in your mind and the way that you want foods that you didn't want before, and it does
Now, somebody
change
will
things.
listen to you. They'll hear you say that, and they'll say, "Poppycock." That's, how could that be? Now, a lot of people will admit they go on a diet, some sort of, let's say a natural sort of just eating 3 good squares with nice meals, light meals, they say they feel different. They feel a little bit euphoric. They feel lighter in their head. They feel a clarity. So you're saying that you actually do get that, but on a even deeper level, because you have less things that are fogging up the brain. Because when you have any sort of hormonal or I don't know what casein actually is. Is it a mineral? Is it a? It's some sort of substance that comes out. I mean, I know what you're saying, but it does affect you. So when that happens, you are a little bit gray in the gray matter up above.
And unfortunately, the milk in our country and what we're saying before, 99.99% of the stuff that we ingest comes from factory farms. So for the most part, our milk doesn't just come with casein. It's also coming with pesticides, steroids, growth hormones, antibiotics. And these things do affect our bodies, and they do affect our physiology, and they affect our psychology, they affect our own hormone levels. And to think that you can ingest this stuff and that it's not going to make a difference, it's really just sort of kidding ourselves to think that it's not going to affect us. And one of the things that I read recently was about a prison study. They took a test group of prisoners and they fed them a vegetarian diet, and then they took another group and they fed them a regular meat-based diet. And wouldn't you know, the prisoners who were having the vegetarian diet actually showed less instances of violence than the other prisoners. So there's something to be said for not only ingesting meat, but for ingesting all those hormones and steroids and antibiotics that are affecting the way you feel and act.
On a completely different note, you're doing something like this, but you had a previous life. You were a well-known or successful agent, weren't you, with the Ford Modeling Agency?
That's right. I was an agent for 5 years in New York City at Ford Models, the most prestigious modeling agency in the world. And I was making a lot of money. I owned a house, and I was living large. But I went to a factory farming conference one weekend with 2 friends. And within the first 5 minutes of the conference, I remember hearing a story about a cow who was brought, she and her calf were brought to a stockyard for an auction, a livestock auction. And when the calf was taken away from this cow, she went crazy. And she tried to get out of the stall that she was in, and she started ramming herself against the stall door. And in doing so, she broke her own neck. And she was left in a puddle of mud to die, but she was still alive with her neck broken and her eyes bulging out of her head and her tongue sticking out the side of her mouth. And at that conference, listening to that, and I just sat there thinking, oh my gosh, if I feel so strongly about what's happening to these animals and I'm not doing anything to help them, who's going to? So I went back to work that Monday and I gave them my notice and I left that job. I said, I don't care if I make $0, I'm going to become an animal rights activist. And I tried to find a job at one of the animal rights organizations and I couldn't, and then eventually that led me to writing that book.
It really came from a passion. It's truly an extraordinary thing you did because you followed that path. How has it been since you've been following that path?
It's been great. It's been really just the most amazing experience of my life, I have to say, and I'm so happy that I followed my passion and I didn't let money rule me or dreams of success rule my path, because now I'm doing what I love. I'm self-employed. I don't work for anybody. The money is not nearly as good as it was before, and it's a struggle some days, but it's okay because this book is selling really well, so hopefully soon the money will come also. But really, we're getting letters every day from people who have gone vegan as a result or are going vegetarian, and it makes all the difference in the world. They say that for every vegan out there, you spare 93 animals or about 100 animals a year. So if you think about how many people I could convert to veganism or vegetarianism and how many animals' lives that would save, it's all worthwhile.
And you're still writing?
I'm still writing, yep. The first book is successful now, so our publisher gave us a 2-book follow-up deal. One is a cookbook, and the other one is a how-to guide for pregnant women.
So that's really going to be important. People really need to know, how do I start transferring this information into my actual meals? How do I take what you talked about and actually fix food for myself? I'm on the run, I've got 2 kids, I've got to go to soccer practice, I've got to get to my job. How does somebody that's busy eat?
It's a great question, and we address that as best we can in the book because we know it's hard for people, and we also know that we'll come up with any excuses that we can to avoid taking better care of ourselves. And one thing that we do provide in the book is 4 weeks of daily menus for people, so that if this is just completely foreign to you and you have no idea, you want to make the changes but you really don't know how to do it, we outline this is what you should eat for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, this is what you should eat for the next 28 days, here's meal plans, follow these meal plans. But I think if you really want to just sort of simplify things and you want a quick, easy answer, I'll tell you. For breakfast, the best thing you can do for your body is eat fresh fruit. As much as you want. Eat fresh fruit. It's great for you. It's easily digestible. You've got vitamins. You've got minerals. It's complex carbohydrate. It'll give you energy. For lunch, make yourself a big, beautiful salad with tons of vegetables. Throw some beans in there. And for dinner, have some steamed veggies, some brown rice, or some pasta. There's so many foods you can eat. There's such a bounty of food. I love food. My co-author and I are the biggest pigs on the planet, and all we do is eat or talk about eating all day long.
How does someone go out to a business lunch, let's say, and they've been taken to a steakhouse? What do they do?
Well, like you said before, you can get a salad or you can just get the side dishes. There's always a lot of vegetables on the side. But I have to say, living in Los Angeles, we're really spoiled. There's so many restaurants here, and even sometimes the steakhouses cater to the vegetarian clients, and they do have either a vegetarian option or a veggie burger. And I've absolutely loved. That was one of the reasons I wanted to move to California, was because of the food.
Well, I know that a lot of the cities now, they have the diet special or whatever. And I know there's so many replacement foods now. There's soy cheeses, there are tofu burgers, there's garden burgers, there's every kind of, I know when I became vegetarian, there wasn't really anything. I mean, there wasn't. And I was having a hard time because I had to just really, I tended to eat a lot more of the carbs. And people say, oh, that's what I'm worried about. I'm going to turn more towards carbs. But the main thing I think you're really expressing is that it's the overall picture of what you're doing for humanity. You're doing something for yourself, but you're also doing something for humanity and being humane with those animals. Now, let's say this does make a big movement. What will happen with all the breeding of cows? I mean, people think about it. What would happen to the industries that occur? They would have to change. There's so many people that would lose their jobs. People would probably ask you questions like this. How would you answer these questions?
Well, my first answer would be, I don't have all the answers.
Right.
What I do know is that what I've seen and what exists on 99.99% of the farms that are out there are factory farms, and that the 10 billion animals that are being slaughtered each year for food in this country are treated abysmally. They're not treated like sentient beings. They're treated like production units. And there's a book called Slaughterhouse, and it was written by Gail Eisnitz. She was the chief humane officer for humane farming. I can't remember the name of the organization right now. But she went out to dozens of slaughterhouses across the country and interviewed dozens of slaughterhouse workers. And the things that she chronicles in her book would stop anyone in their tracks from eating meat ever again. And I think that we can grow the other businesses out there. We can increase our sales of soy products and
organic products.
Exactly. I don't think that we're going to have to
farming.
worry about unemployment rates skyrocketing if we change over from a meat-based diet to a plant-based diet. We're going to just, people still need to eat something.
Right,
and
right.
Just sort of going back to what you said before about people worrying about carbs, and if they give up eating meat that they're going to be carb heavy. It's absolutely okay to eat carbs, and that's one of the things that's really frustrating about the whole low-carb, high-protein crazes that this country has been experiencing in the last few years with the Atkins diet. Carbs are not a bad thing, and they've become this dirty word, but the dirty carbs are the simple carbs. They're the refined carbs, like the white rice, the white flour, the sugar. But fruits, vegetables, whole grains, like whole wheat bread and brown rice, those are great carbs. It's okay to overload on those as much as you want. They're excellent for your body. They're excellent for your health, and they won't make you fat.
What is your dream for the planet?
My dream is a vegan planet, because we all know, as in the animal rights movement, that vegans are not only helping animals, but we're also helping the environment. The University of Chicago released findings that the greenhouse emissions, the global warming basically is being more affected by factory farming than both the auto industry and just regular industry combined. So if you're really concerned about the environment, instead of going out and buying a Prius, you can actually just become a vegetarian and have a bigger impact.
What do you think is important for the children to learn about eating, about their health?
Well, I think for children, the first thing that they should learn is compassion, because the animals that they're eating are not being treated the way that children would want animals to be treated. But also for their health, really there's so much evidence that eating a meat and dairy diet are not really the way to go for our bodies, and we're so much serving ourselves better if we're eating fruits and vegetables and whole grains.
Making food, especially fruits and vegetables, fun for kids. I think you need a kid's version of this, something that's fun for them so that they see Mr. Banana as somebody good to make friends with and everything. In these last moments here, how do you feel that the change is going in the humane community as well? You know, the other part of the world is maybe not as conscious. How conscious is the humane community of these aspects? You've got a lot of people that are doing wonderful things for animals, but do you feel that there's a cohesiveness, that they're working together?
I think that a lot of organizations are sort of gelling together and working together. The one thing people always ask me, you know, if you're an animal rights activist, how do you choose what issues you work on? And you know, I'm sure, as you know, I get about 1,000 emails a day, and I try to answer every single one that I can. Some of them are signing petitions, some of them are emailing legislators and congressmen. The only reason that I picked this issue to focus on and write the book on is because it's the largest number of animals that are being slaughtered each year. It's 10 billion. But I think all the issues are important for animal rights groups, and I would really love to see the other animal rights group, whether they're involved in the dog and cat rescue or the fur issues, to come together and try and go vegetarian, because that's going to influence the biggest number of animals.
I hope that this is a very important show that people will look at and take to heart, but also there's a whole big world out there of people that aren't as aware, and I think if it starts just in your home, it can spread out to then your friends, spread out to your community. And I know that when I go someplace, people always do one thing. They always apologize. Do you mind if I eat meat? And I said, it doesn't bother me. You're the one eating it. It's going to bother you. So I think it's something that everybody has to think about. Thank you so much for coming, today. And I think that this book, Skinny Bitch, is just wonderful. And I think that all of us ought to think about veganism, not just vegetarianism. And I'm going to be thinking about that a lot. So thanks so much. Thanks for joining us here on Critter Crusades, the show about ordinary people on extraordinary missions. Go out and make a difference in the community and pick up some fruits and vegetables. It'll be really great for you. Thanks for joining us.